Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's 3 o'clock session of the 2022 North Country Leadership Summit, Optimizing Healthcare, Community Collaboration, and Workforce Resiliency. We want to give a thank you and shout out to all of the sponsors for this year's event. Without your support, we would not be able to put on this event, so we thank all of our sponsors, new and old, for the continued support. Just for a few housekeeping items, we ask that everyone remains muted with their video off for the entirety of the presentation. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to add those to the chat, and we'll be facilitating a Q&A after the slides. And as a reminder, every session is being recorded and will be archived on our Summit webpage and on our YouTube page, and we'll be sure to send out a notification on that when it is ready. And with that, I want to introduce our speakers for today. Jason Guzzo and Dave Wolff will be talking about providing broadband connections in the Adirondacks. Turn it over to you now.
Thank you very much, Nancy. And Jason, can you pop it up there, please? Jason and I are going to be tag teaming today. I'm going to start. We're going to be talking to a topic that the pandemic has shown, as everybody knows, it's a necessity, not a nice to have. Universal access to high-speed broadband. The good news, we all live in the beautiful North Country. The bad news is deploying universal high-speed broadband, especially in the Adirondacks, is challenging at best. Today, Jason and I are going to try and give an update on the status of broadband. And I like to shorthand it by saying 100 at 100 is our goal. It's having 100% of the population have access and be able to utilize service of at least 100 megabits or better. Jason, I'll let you introduce yourself when you come in, but myself, I'm with ADK Action. It's a nonprofit focused on creating projects to address unmet needs, promote vibrant communities, and preserve the beauty of the Adirondacks for all. For over 10 years, I've been hosting a monthly call with key stakeholders in the North Country broadband space, providers, town officials, interested citizens, representatives from state, federal broadband related agencies. As a result, I've got, I think, a good understanding of the challenges we face and the progress we're making trying to achieve universal access to high-speed broadband in the North Country. Jason?
Well, my name is Jason Guzzo. I'm CEO and General Manager of Hudson Valley Wireless. We provide a lot of telecommunications services in and around the Adirondack parks, both with private LTE networks as well as campus-based solutions. So current network passes 120,000 homes, 8,500 businesses, and 450 anchor institutions. And we predominantly focus on providing services into some of the unserved and underserved regions. So back over to you, Dave.
Next slide, please. So to get to universal access, there's actually 5 steps. And the most important one, I like to say, is the very first one, availability, which is, is there broadband out there that it's attached to or in the vicinity of my home? Let me back up a sec, though. In New York State, high speed is defined as 100 megabits of download speed, 20 megabits upload. If you have less than 20 megabits download, you are considered unserved. If you have less than 100 megabits download, you're considered underserved. So going back to the chart, I put the first 2 buckets. One is called, the very top there, broadband availability, and then the second one, broadband access, kind of together. The availability, as I said earlier, is there a broadband wireline network connection or a fixed wireless connection to my house? Excuse me. Per a 2021 controller report, over 250,000 households in the state don't have high-speed internet available in their neighborhood. Now, access means that there is a connection to my house. Do I have a subscription? Again, according to the controller, in 2019, over 1 million households in the state of New York did not have a subscription to broadband. The remaining three, can I afford it? Do I have the requisite equipment, or do I have the requisite skills, are all very important. But of course, if you don't have the connection or the subscription, they don't impact you. Okay, Jason, next, please. Before we get into each of these steps, I'd like to step back, and AHI, as many of you know, has had a survey out, two surveys, one on the, I'll call it consumer side, one on the provider side. And I just wanted to use some results from the provider side to highlight how what you're seeing on the survey results correlate back to the steps I just mentioned. On this chart, you'll see at the very top on the left side there, broadband connectivity issues are 55% of the respondents on the provider side say that's a problem. I'm not showing the chart, but on another question, there were failed visits due to technology challenges. That came in at 20%. If you come down, you can see the next one on the left side really talks to equipment. And at the bottom on the right-hand side talks to about the needing more technology. A lack of equipment, about 30% of the respondents said that that's an issue. Additional technology would be helpful. About 36% said that would be useful. And then finally, on the right-hand side, you see the call out for training, saying that additional training, about 31%, would be very helpful. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jason and let you take it away with availability.
So in order to make sure that we meet our program goals of having 100% availability to all the households and businesses, we must first identify all the unserved and underserved locations. So right now there's 5 major mapping initiatives that are underway that could impact the broadband connectivity in New York. There's a major initiative that's going on with the FCC right now. And the FCC coincidentally also has a vendor partner called CostQuest Associates, which also does a lot of economic data modeling for New York State. Between those two efforts, the FCC had awarded CostQuest $50 million to redo some of the broadband mapping. So there's a lot of funding that's been appropriated by Congress to help solve this problem. So in addition to that, a lot of the county governments are working with an organization called ECC Technologies. And then the New York State Public Service Commission is also working with ECC Technologies to fix some of the mapping within the state. And then we're also working with partners such as Microsoft to take some real-time data and fix some of the mapping as well. So as we dive into the challenges with the mapping, one of the biggest challenges right now is the current mapping methodology is done on a census block level. So I'm currently down in Midtown Manhattan, and a definition of a census block is about the size of a city block down here. As we go to the Adirondacks, they're all different shapes and sizes, and as you can see, it's a little bit larger than a city block, and it's could be different sides of mountains, streams. There could be all sorts of geographic boundaries in the way, which present some challenges for deploying some broadband networks. So the way that the current methodology for determining unserved and underserved is if one household within that census block potentially has access to service, the current funding mechanisms determine that the entire census block is served. So a lot of the funding that's been appropriated based upon the census block level, if one home is served, then they deem the whole census block as being served. And we're trying to get a lot more granular all the way down to the address level with some of that data. And then this data is used to appropriate different funding and then also administered through the grant levels as well. So what you're going to see here with this other illustration, in the top left-hand corner, you're going to see some of the awards that went out in some of the New York Broadband Program, where some of the awards are based upon census block levels. So in some areas, you might see Hudson Valley Wireless, there might be Slick Networks, there might be Verizon, there might be HughesNet that were awarded different services. And then on the other illustration, you're going to see all the different service providers that have overlapping coverage within the census block. So what we're trying to do first is, on the federal level, they first need to coalesce around the definition of what is a broadband serviceable location. Because there might be a building on a parcel, but that building could be a chicken coop, it could be an outhouse, it could be a barn or a disconnected building. Doesn't necessarily mean that that building is going to subscribe to an internet subscription. So the FCC has a very complex system for what they call their BSL, or the Broadband Serviceable Location Fabric. And the BSL takes the building footprints, which is either from Microsoft or other data sources, tax parcels, addresses, road segments, census blocks. They even look at some of the credit card history and mailings, and then they determine, is that an actual location where somebody might subscribe to service? And then once they have all that, they visually verify, look at satellite imagery to see if that's actually a house. And that's what constitutes the BSL, or the Broadband Serviceable Location Fabric. And from that fabric, that's what all future funding is going to be determined from. So as we start reconciling some of the mapping efforts, first we need to see, does my physical location exist? And then can we get broadband service to that location? So then the next part of the mapping exercise, which is much improved from the previous submissions, is before service providers are required to submit our broadband deployment data, our coverage patterns, on a one served, all served census block methodology twice a year. And it's kind of on the honor system. So whatever we submit that we provide coverage to, we send that into the FCC, and the FCC takes a look at that, and that's where funding decisions are typically based off of. The new versions are requiring much more granular detail, but they also are requiring a certain prerequisite for either the staff has to have certain credentials, like so many years of experience, or they have to have a PE or engineering stamp to go onto the data that's submitted, just to ensure that it's accurate. If it's not accurate, the FCC also now has enforcement capability where they can go after some bad actors that have been embellishing some of their broadband coverages to prevent funding going out to certain areas. And what the result of that's going to look like is, if you're looking at wireline deployments, such as fiber to the home or hybrid cable, then it's going to look like a string going up and down the road. So we're no longer looking at the census block where one served, all served. They're going to know where the broadband is on the road, and then the potential locations that are served off of that. If you're looking at fixed wireless, then this is an example of one of our coverage patterns where you'll be able to see where the tower is. These are the different coverage patterns, and where it overlaps these dots up here, that's the households. So we have to submit different coverage polygons showing at what speeds can we provide service to the individual households. So I'm very pleased to say that the mapping is getting very granular. It's getting much better, and the thought process that they put together with this is very impressive. On the county side and the local side, many of the counties that you see represented here in the colors have all contracted with a company called ECC Technologies. And ECC Technologies is also working on an independent effort with the Public Service Commission to collect similar data to be able to get real-world drive test data. So what we're going to see here is there's purple dots. Those purple dots represent an E911 or a data point, which is going to be a house. And if we look at...
Just lost the share.
I just lost the share, Dave?
Yeah.
Bear with me for 1 second. I'll try and do this again. Are you able to see that again?
Yes. It's back.
Okay. So if we look at the service provider, which is represented by the orange right here, the ECC drive test technicians actually rode out into the road, and they drove the pole lines to see where the service providers actually provide coverage. If you look at the next segment, which is up to the north of the map right here, that's showing another service provider. And as we look over here to the yellow, that's showing an area that doesn't have any fiber, doesn't have any coax on the poles. So we at least know down to the pole level where there's broadband access. And then what we're going to do is the Public Service Commission, New York State, and then the FCC, they're hopefully going to reconcile all these maps together. And they're going to be able to use that to determine who is actually unserved, who is underserved, and then they can use that to appropriate certain funding to pick the right technology to deploy services. So a lot of the funding is going to be going to building fiber to the home. And this is an example of what it would look like to build fiber to the home to an entire neighborhood. Many of the parts in the Adirondacks exceed the extremely high cost thresholds to where at a certain point, it's not economical to build fiber to every single one of the homes. At a certain point, we're going to be running out of money. Fiber is a great technology and it should be used to serve as many people as possible. But if somebody's on a different side of a lake, what we can do with different wireless technology is we can do what's called a small cell wireless deployment, either deploy fixed LTE off of one of these poles and beam broadband across the lakes, or what we've done in a few lakes in the Adirondacks is we've actually off of poles or buildings tapped off of the fiber networks and beamed high capacity circuits to feed some of the homes. And some of the areas that we're serving have link capacities up to 500 megabits per second. So with wireless technology, we can actually deliver up to 10 gigabits per second off of a wireless bridge in that distance. So we can deliver fiber light speeds just across some of these chasms where it wouldn't make sense to drop fiber in a lake or get around some other obstructions. And another area that we can utilize alternative technologies is private LTE. So areas where we have healthcare clinics in downtown areas, or if we're looking at either tourism areas or areas that could be public areas for public hotspots, whether that's parks or villages or other public property, we can deploy hotspot or private LTE technology just to make sure that people have connections while they're waiting for connections to be dropped into their homes. The next thing we're going to be showing you is some Microsoft data. So Microsoft, as part of their Airband program, put together a digital equity dashboard. And the digital equity dashboard basically combines some of the data sources that aren't necessarily used by the FCC or the state. That they look at different data sources such as broadband speeds, or when people do speed tests, how long does it take to get a Microsoft update, and other indicators such as census and population data. And they put that through a BI or an artificial intelligence program to figure out what are the challenges. Is the challenge going to be, is it availability? Is it access? Is it device access? And that's what we're going to step through during today's presentation. So in order to access the tool, you can do a search for Microsoft Airband Digital Equity Dashboard. And then once that pops up, you should be able to select the state and then the counties you want to be able to gather detail on. So once you select the data set, such as, are you going to be looking for wireline availability or wireless availability or device access, it's going to produce a map that's going to look very similar to this. And what this is going to show us is all the way down to the census tract level, some details. So those details are going to be showing us the county in which the census tract resides, the population for that tract, different socioeconomic indicators, as well as this chart is specifically looking for wireline availability. How many people don't have access to cable technology, and how many people don't have access to fiber technology within that census tract. And what they also do is they assign a score to that. So there's an index value that's down here in the corner that's associated with their digital equity dashboard. So that index value shows essentially the areas that are in the blue show the lowest amount of digital inequity, and these areas that are represented as we start getting into the yellow into the orange show the highest areas of inequities. So this is an easy way to illustrate where there's some challenges within a specific community. And if we want to take things one step further, we can take this data and do a cross segment against another data source. In this case, we're looking at population, because when we look at the Adirondack parks, they're some of the most sparsely populated areas. And that's one of the reasons why it doesn't make sense for some service providers to deploy network, because they don't have enough customers to get a return on it. So you can see in this case, there's a direct correlation to the digital inequities and the population. This is another example that we ran for fixed wireless. And with fixed wireless, you can see a huge amount of inequity because it's not easy to deploy wireless networks within the Adirondack parks. So there's huge coverage gaps within the parks for various tower siting reasons and the other geographic challenges with trees and mountains. So Dave, over to you to talk about the New York State maps.
Thanks, Jason. First of all, if you notice in the bottom left of each of these slides, there's a little box down there, and they're the original 5 steps I mentioned. And when Jason was talking, the very first step, availability, was lit up. Now we're trying to light up the access, which is the second step. This is the good news. In June, the PSC launched their online broadband availability access map. This was a map that they were directed to produce by the legislature last year. As Jason pointed out, they worked with ECC Technologies to come up with the results. I'll take you into how to use the map because it's very important. And one of the takeaways from this presentation is we're asking everybody to please go on this map, and the URL is there in dark blue. It's mapmybroadband.dps.ny.gov, or you simply can put into a Google search, New York State online availability map, and it will bring you right to the website. This is one of the views that ECC was able to pull together for the state. You're looking at percent unserved addresses here, so we're still kind of on the availability side. I'll get into the access side in a second. So anything in orange, it's different levels of unserved by, in this case, it would be county. And you can drill down into this, no problem at all. As I said at the beginning, the unserved, underserved, the availability side of the house is about 250,000 households that are at risk. Now I'm going to look at access, and again, back at the beginning, I referenced 1 million households didn't have access to a subscription in New York State. Actually, when you go to a non-metropolitan area, it gets worse. It's like almost 1/3 of the residents in non-metropolitan areas lack a wired in-home high-speed internet subscription, which is a little scary. Jason, next slide, please. If you go to that website, it will ask you to put in your address, and I'm asking everybody here to do this and also to pass this information along, any provider or partner, to any of your clients. Please go check your address out. The accuracy of the information that New York State has in terms of where the unserved, underserved are is critical to its ability to get more money from the federal government. So we need the most accurate maps we can have. If you do put your address in, this happens to be showing my address on Lake Cowassa here. And what you'll see, just pointing to where I live, and it's showing that I'm a blue dot, which means I do have service. I'm sorry I hit it a little bit underneath the feedback box over here, but the service is with Spectrum. I actually have 400 megabit service, so it's an excellent service here on my side of the lake. If you find out that there's anything here that is not accurate, there's a button, it's just to the right there, that says provide feedback. to the PSC, excuse me, and that's what they're looking for. If you find out that there's a problem, by all means, thank you, right there. Click on that button. And the reason why it's important is this data was a first cut. If you go to the next slide, please. This is the indicating, it'll be there in a second, the level of inaccuracy that does exist. There it is. So this is also coming right off the website. So you can actually have a view of service at a sort of a topological level. This is the lake I live on. It's Lake Kawasa. The blue dots with numbers in them indicate addresses that have service. If it's got a number, it simply means we're high enough up in the sky that it is putting multiple addresses together, 3 or 4. If you got closer, it would actually spread out and you'd see the individual addresses. What's important, since I happen to know the lake very well, is that there are 11 addresses on the western shore, the red ellipse over there, that are shown as not having service, but as it turns out, they got service, the kind of service that Jason talked about. We're actually taking a fixed wireless feed from the side of the lake and beaming across the lake and lighting up all 11 addresses with more than 100 meg service. Conversely, down at the bottom, it's an outlet from the lake, it's showing 11 addresses, it just happens to be the same number, that supposedly have service. The answer is they do not have service. And this is we need to make sure that the PSC has as an accurate as a map as possible, as I said before. Okay, hang on a sec. I'll catch up with you. So next chart, the access, sometimes people are confused. Remember I said before, availability is, do I have broadband that goes by my driveway, my front door, and is able to connect to my house? Now, there are situations where you do have a broadband network going, coax fiber down in front of your driveway, but you can't get on it. One of the reasons is it depends on the technology that's going down your road. There's long haul fiber and coax that allows connections between major nodes in a provider's network that is not capable, or you cannot splice into it to do a last mile connection to a house. So having fiber or coax out front doesn't necessarily guarantee that you can get to it. Secondarily, some of that fiber or coax may be old enough that they didn't put in enough capacity in that network, and they can't add. We've seen this in a number of places in the Adirondacks where there is a fiber network and it is simply at capacity. They cannot do any more splicing to serve local homes, in which case they would have to upgrade the actual infrastructure. Also, Spectrum, they have franchise agreements with most towns in the North Country. Those agreements are overseen by the Public Service Commission, and they contain pretty much the same language. In those agreements, Spectrum agrees to build out to every household within a central area where there's a high home density for free. If, and this is important, if that house is located within 150 feet of the road. If you're more than 150 feet from the road and you want service, you're going to have to contribute to the construction of that hookup some portion of the cost with Spectrum. And there's actually a formula that is in the franchise agreement to specify what that cost would be. And then when you get away from the hamlet side, you get out into the countryside where there's less density, Spectrum is not required to build out. But if the homeowners are willing to do what's called a contribution in aid of construction, where they pay a portion of the cost, and that cost goes down as more people sign up, then they can get service. So again, you may see service on a neighboring road where there's not much density, and you say, why can't I have it on my road? And maybe the people on that neighboring road actually paid for it. So having if you will, fiber or coax in front of your house doesn't necessarily guarantee that you can get to it. Okay, Jason. This is Going back to the Microsoft data, this is Essex County. In this case, I'm trying to do a transition now to go from, I'll call it availability and access into the remaining 3 buckets. And you see in the bottom left, I'm going into affordability. And the transition is the following. The 3 most important factors that correlate with the lack of subscription are education attainment. What level of education did you finish high school, for instance? Your age, are you a senior citizen or not? As you get older, you tend to have less, the percentage of the population that has a subscription, and your income. And this is one that's showing actually a correlation between income, and the ellipse on the bottom right there is saying that for households with less than $20,000 of income, specifically in these actual census blocks in these towns in Essex County, they have incredibly high lack of connection, a lack of subscription. So I'm making a transition that says, okay, one of the problems you've got is I can't, the broadband may be to my house, I can't afford it. Help. So I'd like to go to the next chart. The good news is we do have some help coming. Actually, it's out there, and this is another to do. I'd ask everybody on this call to make sure you spread the word on this. Something called the Affordable Connectivity Program. It's an FCC program. $14.2 billion is allocated for this program. And what it does is it provides for eligible households. You see at the top of the chart, they will, if you will, subsidize up to $30 off your monthly broadband service bill. And you get a one-time discount of up to $100 to actually purchase some equipment. Who's eligible? It's a pretty broad list of eligibility, starting with, if you're less than 200% of the federal poverty guidelines, and you see the little chart on the right just shows you based on the number of people in the household what that level of income has to be. And then it's a pretty broad list of people on Pell Grants, SNAP program, Medicaid, Lifeline, veterans programs, etc. Long story short, it's basically about 2 million households in the state of New York would qualify for this program, this credit. Next slide, please. This is a dashboard. It's got a lot of great information on it about the Affordable Connectivity Program. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the dashboard and then talk to some of the concerns in the North Country. So up here at the top, where you have the United States, in the bottom left of that, if you actually go to this website, and the website is there in blue, just on top of the United States, and click on it, you can go to a state. And this is calling out, as you can see here, the state of New York. As I mentioned, if you do the numbers, you're close to 2 million people eligible. The good news, we're getting close to 50% of the population that's eligible is signed up for this program, but that still says that there's almost 1 million households that could get a $30 discount per month that are not getting that discount. If you go to the bottom right of the United States picture, you see a place where you can click and actually put in a zip code. And this is the zip code for Seneca Lake, Harrietstown. And unfortunately, we are almost only a quarter of the people that are eligible have signed up, and only $4,500 in benefits have been actually utilized from this program. So getting the word out to folk, this program exists, is vital, and especially in the North Country, where a lot of folks would in fact be eligible. If no additional funds are allocated to this program, current course and speed, the projection is it will be exhausted by probably about March of 2025. Next slide, please. So this is one of the key takeaways is please pass along to any client, anybody that you talk to, if you're eligible, and this is how you find out if you're eligible. If you don't know for sure, at the top, you can call that number. For eligible households, is a little less than obvious. You have to do two things. Have to actually submit an application and then talk to your provider, because you have to pick a service that they then can charge you less, because the provider gets the money and they just charge you less, is the good news. So again, just one more time, two things that we're going to ask you to do at the end. This is one of them. Pass the word on this. Let me see. At this point, back to you, Jason, to go to the next step, which is talking about the actual equipment or devices.
Oh, thank you, Dave. Yeah, and I can't emphasize enough that's found money with the ACP program. So this is targeted to help our most vulnerable populations, and it's very simple to enroll. The participant just needs to go online. The application process probably takes less than 10 minutes. Once they're approved, they're getting $30 a month off of their monthly internet service. Now, in addition to that, the ACP will also provide a one-time device credit. So once they're approved into the program, the FCC can then reimburse the service provider $100 towards the cost of an eligible device, and that'll help bring more people online if they don't actually have a computing device. So that'll help us segue into this chart right here, where we see some data that was put together from Cornell's IR lab. And this chart shows the percentage of household with no internet access. So as we start looking up to the North Country, this is a percentage of households with no computer devices, and there's some pretty isolated pockets with high percentages of no computing devices in there. Another county that we're looking at is Lewis County. So here's a chart showing device access in Lewis County. And if we look at target this down to the census tract level, this is showing us within this specific census tract that 30% of the households, or 30% of the population, do not have a laptop or a desktop. That number is pretty high. Now, fortunately, we're actually currently working with Lewis County and just wrapped up a CDBG grant project over there, where we're going to be rolling out some free internet using the ACP program, and then also some additional low-cost devices through some other partnerships as well. So we're very fortunate to have partners with Microsoft to help us roll out affordable devices. They have several different models that they can assist with. One is direct to consumer, where we direct the consumer to go to a website, and then they've provided us with a book of coupons. So once we give somebody that needs the program a coupon, then they're able to purchase an affordable device. They don't need to qualify for ACP to enroll with the direct-to-consumer affordable computer program. All they need to do is just contact us, and we can give them a coupon. They also have bulk sales opportunities, refurbished devices, and then also third-party bulk sales opportunities. But through the refurbishment partners, an example of what we can do, because we're also working with one of their partners, PCs for People, who work specifically with the ACP program. So somewhere between $11 and $50, if the subscriber contributes $11 to $50 for a refurbished computer, then this PCs for People will be shipping them a desktop or a laptop directly to their home. So the reason for the $11 charge is the FCC requires that the consumer gets charged more than $10, or they have to contribute more than $10. So we charge somewhere between $11 and $50, and depending on what devices are on the market at that specific time, they can go anywhere between $11 and $100, depending on the equipment that's available. But great program, and that's an easy way to get them set up with the money. If the consumer wants a brand new piece of equipment, this is an example of one of the bundles that's available on the direct-to-consumer site. So you can get a piece of equipment that's valued at $525 for $199. And if $199 is too expensive for somebody, they also have a program where they partnered with Klarna to split the payments into multiple payment intervals to allow them to term that out over a certain period of time. So we're trying to work on unique programs to take affordability of the devices and remove that as a barrier of entry. So Dave, over to you to talk about digital literacy.
Thanks, Jason. So the last area, the last step, I'm going to focus on older adults here as a major focus area. Per the AARP's Aging Connection program, as I mentioned earlier, age is one of the 3 strongest predictors, along with income and education attainment, in correlating with residential non-adoption. And that really, in many cases, it's not just money. It comes down to skills. If you think about it, the experience, at least for some of us with grandchildren, is if you don't know what to do with your device, you turn to your grandchild because they've grown up in the digital world. They, have this sort of informal training, and they become digital natives. And the senior side of the population hasn't had that experience. And as you can see here, when you get to New York, both at the United States level and at the New York State level, in terms of connectivity, in terms of computer access, the older adults population is underneath in New York State's 11% less population-wise, percentage-wise, in terms of connectivity and/or access to devices. So major focus area on older adults. The good news, next chart, please, is older adults technology services. You may have heard about it, OATS. They have a facility up in Plattsburgh or Malone. They're now affiliated with the AARP. It's a nonprofit organization. It's dedicated to, quotes, harnessing the power of technology to help older adults improve their lives. So it's not new to the North Country. You can see here on the left-hand side of the report card, they've actually worked with over 800 older adults so far. And if you skim down through that, 40% of those 800 actually have then gone out and acquired equipment. A third have gone out and actually gotten a subscription to broadband. And 98% satisfaction. That's pretty damn good. And the other good news is they just received a $250,000 grant to expand their work in the North Country, working with the 3 major library networks that you see here to partner with those libraries to teach even more older adults on how to use technology and to hopefully reduce this skills gap that does exist. And I think, Jason, back to you.
Okay, so we've just identified a lot of the different challenges, but the good news is there's probably about $130, $140 billion worth of funding that's going to be coming through the pipeline pretty soon to help solve some of these challenges, whether those challenges happen to be broadband availability, access, devices, digital inclusion, digital literacy. There's buckets of funding that are specifically targeted for that. The main ones that are going to be coming through New York State Connect All office is currently working with, I believe, a $1.45 billion budget. And one of the main buckets that they're working through is through the NTIA. Right now, they're in a state planning cycle, but this is a formula-based allocation. The total amount of funding that's going into that program is about $45 billion across the entire country. So because it's formula-based, if we can identify more unserved locations within New York, to the extent we can identify more unserved locations, that money is going to go directly to New York State's budget. And once they allocate that to the budget, they'll be able to probably deploy more fiber to the home networks and get more people connected at greater speed. So there's probably another $300 million that's going to be used for Treasury and other areas.
Before you leave, go back to that chart for a sec, if you would, Jason. The bottom right-hand corner of that chart, if you can see it, it's got a middle mile, BEAD program, and digital equity. That all came out of the jobs legislation. Middle mile, you're looking at $1 billion. BEAD is 42.5 billion. That's all infrastructure money. That's going to help address availability. The digital equity is about 2.75 billion, and that's going to be aiming at the affordability, the skills, and the equipment side of the equation. And the Connect to All office in Albany is the lead for New York State with regard to interfacing with the feds, trying to get that money. And on the digital equity side, they are going to put in place a digital equity director to lead that effort. And we are working here in the North Country. Nancy and AHI are members of a network across New York State focused on digital equity and inclusion. And that network is going to work closely with the Connect to All office to help plan for and then allocate the monies that New York State gets in this space on digital equity going forward. Back to you, Jason.
Yep. So while we're on this chart, we should probably talk about some of the timelines as well in terms of when are some of these projects, when are the funds going to be available? When are they going to trickle down to the service providers? And when are we going to actually start to see meaningful deployment for wireline and fixed wireless facilities as well? So right now, the major buckets that we're talking about through Treasury and NTIA, both are currently representing about $330 to $340 million worth of their overall budget. So Treasury, I believe, is somewhere 335, 340. That money should be available to start rolling out fairly soon to the service providers to target symmetrical 100 by 100, 100 meg down, 100 meg up internet connections. The NTIA needs to look at the mapping to make sure that the maps are correct. And because it's formula based, once the maps get trued up, then that's going to go out to bidding out to the certain service providers. They're going to do an analysis to figure out where are the extremely high cost areas and what technology makes the best sense to deploy in certain areas. Many of the funding agencies have a clear preference for deploying fiber to most areas, but when they realize it's on the backside of a mountain or the other side of a lake, that's when we start branching out to alternative technologies so we can move away from just having areas served by satellite only. In terms of the deployment timelines, just because grants are bid out or grants are awarded, there's also some significant timelines in terms of deployment. We've been seeing make-readies, around 280 days, you think, Dave, for make-readies? And what a make-ready is as soon as an attacher says, I want to put some equipment on a telephone pole, like a fiber optic cable, or it could even be fixed wireless equipment, then the pole owner needs to make sure that that pole has capacity and space for the new attachments. The new attacher has to actually pay for all of those upgrades, but there's such a backlog in clearing the poles and making them ready for the new networks that we're even once a project moves forward, we still need to wait about 280 days or probably a year for the pole owner to make that available for the new attacher to put stuff on there. So we're probably not going to start seeing some meaningful deployment in some of these areas I would dare to guess maybe 2024, 2025 is when we're going to start seeing some strides in building the networks.
Correct.
So now we have some homework to do. So the biggest thing is report the unserved, underserved addresses. There's no substitute for local knowledge. So we need people with the boots on the ground looking at the maps, making sure that their home appears on the map, making sure that the service provider reported, are they actually covering it or are they not covering it? True that up with the FCC, true up those maps with the Public Service Commission. And then the next action item that we have here is get the word out for affordable connectivity. It's found money for our most vulnerable populations. They can get $30 a month off of their internet connection and potentially a free device, or if they pay $10 or a little bit more, they'll be able to get a close to free device. And that's the difference between bringing these folks online or not. So the Affordable Connectivity Program, they have a consumer outreach toolkit that you can download. Some of these areas have broad-based eligibility. So some schools have a national school lunch plan, and all of the students are eligible for that. If there's certain Medicaid lists or Medicare lists or other broad-based eligibility, I would encourage some of the providers on this call to send out mailers to your patients and inform them, let them know that these free services exist. And then if you didn't see the grant, that we're tracking about $120, $130 or $30 billion worth of grant funding that's currently out there. There are some other grants that are specifically available to target the healthcare industry, either to build private LTE networks or build out other telehealth services. So if there's any questions about grants, feel free to reach out to Dave or myself, and we'd be happy to see if we can connect you with the right funding sources. So with that, I'd like to open things up for questions.
Thank you so much, Jason and Dave. This was awesome. Everyone, feel free to add any questions into the chat, or I'll actually also click the button to allow you guys to unmute if you want to, talk through any questions. But we do have one in the chat currently. And also for our participants, I was actively placing some of the links from what Jason and Dave were talking about right in the chat. So feel free to explore those before the slide deck's available. But Jason and Dave, the question that we have in here currently is, does the ACP map take internet availability into enrolled percentages?
Great question. I honestly don't know the answer. Do you, Jason? If not, we'd have to do some research.
I think we would have to do
guess,
some
but I
research
don't
on
know.
that.
I can guess. But good question.
All right. Everyone is allowed to unmute now, so if there are any things you want to chat about, feel free. And I'll give everyone another minute or two to write in any questions you may have in the chat. Otherwise, you will have Jason and Dave's contact information when the slides and recording are released.
And I'll get back to you, Nancy, with what I uncover on that question.
Great, thank you. Last call for any questions, but while we are waiting, I want to thank both Jason and Dave for taking the time this afternoon to chat. I think this is a really important topic that we all think about in the healthcare field when we talk about telehealth, but I would think that many of our participants don't really know the ins and outs of broadband access, and especially in the Adirondack region. So I think this was really informative and something we could all take back to not only our organizations, but our communities as well.
Well, thank you for the chance to present the case, as it were. Both of us spent a lot of time focused on broadband. And if there are follow-on questions, by all means, forward them to us, please.
Yes, of course. If anyone has anything this week and you don't have their information, feel free to email me. You've probably gotten a few emails by this point about the conference from my email, and I'll be happy to forward them on.
Well, thank you for inviting us. This was a pleasure discussing the topic.
Thanks so much. We have some good kudos in the chat as well. Thank you. There is hope. More out there than I knew.
There is hope. Thanks, everybody.
Have a
a good
great
day.
afternoon.
Bye-bye now.